So, I'm making a video today. This is actually a response to another video by a Catholic priest, Father Barron. Father Barron has this video where he talks about the problem of having moral arguments, addressing moral arguments in our society. And he says he's concerned because at this point in our society, we're no longer able to have moral arguments, that what we do at best is we just kind of talk past each other. And what he does is when he talks about this, he uses the issue of gay marriage as a particular for this. The reason I think this really needs to be addressed is not because I think he's wrong about the problem of making moral argument. I think it's real. I think people don't think they make decisions from their guts, from up here. And whenever you begin to pick apart any sort of argument they have, these arguments and basically non-arguments, and you point out, well, this is premise 1 and this is premise 2, so this is your conclusion. Not only does this not follow, I question the premises that you use to get there. You can be very nice about it. You can be very tactful. People still become very upset. They're just acting from their gut. They don't really want to think about things. They don't really want to argue in that sense of debate, about discussion, about hammer this stuff out, about get it right. They're not really worried about that. So I think he's right there. But I guess I think what he's doing is he's not really using. He talks about gay marriage in this movement towards marriage equality. I don't think he's actually using marriage equality as an example of a problem that he has with not being able to talk about moral arguments in our society. Rather, I think what he's really doing is trying to say that gay marriage is wrong, and the reason we're moving towards marriage equality, the reason it's hard to talk about it is because we can't talk about moral arguments anymore. So I want to address what he's saying about marriage equality, because I think he's missed the point there. I think he's wrong. I think that the interpretations he gives are uncharitable, and he either misunderstands or, even worse, misrepresents the other side. So I want to clear that up. The very first thing he talks about in terms of this, he says that he was reading something about the Supreme Court, and he quotes Justice Elena Kagan as saying, "Whenever a lawyer makes a moral observation in a case such as this, for me the red flag of discrimination goes up." And he said, this is an example of how anytime anybody begins to talk about moral arguments, they risk being called a bigot. They risk being called some discriminatory, that there's something wrong with them, they're doing something wrong and judging people unfairly and blah, blah, blah. I got two things to say about this. First, I don't think that the concern about discrimination is a red herring. I think that's real. I think that there is a history of discrimination. I think that there is current discrimination. I think that's a genuine issue. So to sort of suggest that this is just some sort of red herring that people are throwing up so they don't have to talk about moral issues, I think is garbage. I think that's untrue. Second, I can't actually find this quote from Kagan. So let me just take him at face value, where this is what she said. That she said, whenever a lawyer makes a moral observation in a case such as this, for me the red flag of discrimination goes up. I don't think that then she's then trying to sidestep and say we can't talk about moral arguments. I think she's saying that it doesn't have a real place here. Well, two things. One, traditionally, when we bring up moral arguments, we're doing it in order to legitimize our discrimination of some group of people. I think it's absolutely true. I think that's what's happened traditionally. And second, I think the point is that lawyers shouldn't be talking about moral arguments in general anyway, or they only talk about them tangentially. I don't think that moral arguments, I think the link between what we legislate and what we think of as moral is tenuous at best. I don't think it's clear. Let me give you just two examples. So something that's immoral that we don't have laws against. Lying to your best friend about what's coming on TV so that you can watch the show you want, right? So there's no law against that. If I lie to my best friend and say, we both want to watch some show, I don't want to watch the show that he wants to do, different shows, I don't want to watch the show he watches, so I tell him that that's a rerun and it's not a new show. We can agree that I've done something technically immoral. It might not be the end of the world, but it's technically immoral. It's not illegal for obvious reasons. That's one. Then we think, here's on the other side, there are things that are illegal that don't tie to morality at all. Red lights. There's nothing intrinsically right or wrong about crossing the street when a red light is lit. It's only because we've legislated, because we've said it's illegal to cross the street when a red light is lit, that it can have any sort of moral connotation at all, because it might turn out that you think that you're morally obligated to behave in a certain way to be a good citizen, etc., etc. In which case, boom, then you would have some moral obligation not to cross the street, possibly. possibly. Not to cross the street when the light is red. But there's certainly nothing intrinsically moral or immoral about crossing the street when some red light is lit. Had no law been made, if nobody's out there and there just happens to be a red light, there's nothing wrong with crossing the street. My point is just that there's the tie between, the connection between what we legislate as legal and illegal and what's right and wrong is tenuous, and it's not always necessary. There's not always a connection at all. So I don't think that Justice Kagan was trying to say we can't have debates about morality. She's saying they don't have a place here for those two reasons. So I think Father Barron completely missed the boat there. I don't know if he just misunderstood. I don't know. The second one. Now, the second thing he talks about is poll numbers, and poll numbers don't determine what's right and wrong. I don't think anyone is saying that poll numbers determine what's right and wrong. I'm not saying you can't find some guy somewhere to say something. But in general, no one thinks that poll numbers are what determine right and wrong. No one is saying truth is determined by consensus. No one's making that kind of argument. The reason we talk about poll numbers is because whatever the percentage is, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm just going to use the number 70% of the people in the U.S. are in favor of marriage equality. That number can be wrong, I don't care. I'm just throwing out a number. If we say that a majority of the people are in favor of marriage equality, what that addresses is this idea that we're changing the definition of marriage when we allow marriage equality. We're not. And it's really easy to demonstrate this. Because it turns out that for all these people, for the majority of Americans, their notion of marriage, their definition of marriage is not harmed. It's not degenerated in some way. They understand that marriage can, in fact, extend to homosexuals. And if they understand that, then their definition of marriage is not being changed. That's what that addresses. It addresses that kind of argument. It doesn't address a right and wrong. In fact, on the contrary, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. I gotta tell you. On the contrary, the people that are the most vocal proponents of marriage equality have been saying since day one that the civil rights of any minority should not be up to the whims and the moods of the majority. That's wrong. That the minority should be protected from the tyranny of the majority. So on the contrary, not only is it not the case that anyone's saying that poll numbers somehow determine what's right and wrong, they're saying that it shouldn't have anything to do with it. It should have always been okay. Because our mood, the mood of the majority does not determine what civil rights the minority should have. So he's completely missed it there too. The last thing that he wants to talk about is this sentimentality. That somehow, whenever someone has that more homosexuals are coming out of the closet, they're more vocal, they're more willing to say that they're gay. And so that when someone comes out and it turns out that before you didn't know any gay people, but now you have uncles and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters who have all come out of the closet, and we think, well, I know that person. That's a good person. And since they're a good person, the things that they do must be good. Hence, marriage equality is okay because they want to get married, that makes it good. No one's saying that. And I just find it bizarre that he would even suggest that. It's hard to believe that he even believes that. He thinks that sentimentality is in play there. And I want to say, I think it's exactly the opposite. I think that on the contrary, again, that what happens is people have this sentimental notion of what they think homosexuality is about. They think it's gross. They think it's certainly maybe immoral, but they think that it's disgusting. I can't imagine doing that. How could you like that? How could you be to a man that way? And then it turns out that their son is gay. And they go, crap, I don't want to think of my son as gross. So they change this. They do change the sentiment, but it turns out they come along and say, since I don't want to think of my son as gross, now I need to decide where I really sit with this. What is it real? Then they're actually open to moral arguments about this. It's only when they have those sorts of realizations that they have to get past saying that the people that do this are disgusting and awful and want to molest children, that really all homosexuals just want to molest children, and then their son is gay, and they go, crap, I don't think that little Jimmy wants to molest children. He's never molested children. He turns out to be into older guys. They realize, crap, my sentiment about this, my gut feeling was wrong. Now I have to think about, what are my real reasons? Do I actually have good reasons? So on the contrary, not only do I think it's that this sentimentality is what's getting people to be more comfortable with marriage equality, I think it's the other way. I think it's the other way around. They're leaving some of that sentimentality behind. It was that gut feeling about that it was disgusting and horrible and I couldn't imagine it. That kind of feeling is what's going away. So I think that it's actually on the other side. I think he completely misses the boat here. I don't really know what's going on with Father Barron. I don't want to say anything too bad about him. I don't know the man personally. But it's really difficult to take this seriously. It's really difficult to imagine that he believes the arguments he's making because they're so obviously wrong. You're wrong. Now let's have some real arguments.